So we launched this out in the middle of our production season in 2019, again, just for our small group. And instantly, like that day, our buyers doubled or tripled what they spent with us.
Huh.
And I thought that we broke it. Like I just assumed we had done something wrong because I knew, like I had all these benchmarks for all the time we'd been working with these buyers of what they were spending. And I went out to them and said, gosh, I'm so sorry. What did you mean to order? And they said, no, that's all correct. You made it easy.
It's the Growing for Market podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming two guests to the Growing for Market podcast, Amelia Ihlo and Shea. Amelia is a farmer and owner of Reverie Flower Farm in New Hampshire and the founder of Rooted, an online farm and food hub sales platform that grew out of her own farm's need for a platform that did more than just sales. And Shea is the manager of the Connecticut Flower Collective, and she also does floral design work through Plant Her Botanical Sculpture. So without further ado, welcome to the Growing for Market podcast, Amelia and Jill.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to talk with you guys because it sounds like a ambitious and interesting conversations. Just to kick it off, Amelia, can you tell us a bit about your farm?
Sure. So we are located in rural New Hampshire, right on the Vermont border. We are a commercial cut flower production, and we sell mostly wholesale, but also started a hub of growers back in 2018, and we sell into the greater Boston market.
Okay. And Jill, can you tell us a bit about the Connecticut Flower Collective?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the manager at the Connecticut Flower Collective, but I really got my start farming when I was 18, which is a long time ago now. I was actually looking for one of my Growing for Market copies that I had in my 2013 farming notebook. And I was so excited to be like, look. Anyway, yeah, so I've been farming for a long time and have a diverse set of experiences doing commercial pepper farming out in New Mexico to community farming and dairy farming in Vermont and Massachusetts, hydroponic and aquaponic and flower farming, and sort of took a lot of those experiences in the field while doing education and admin to sort of form this perfect monster of a job into the Connecticut Flower Collective, which kind of combines my experience out in the field with admin and creativity to cover sort of our designer base group.
Mm-hmm.
So I just say that to say that it's really exciting for me to be in a unique position to take all of those skills and apply them to this hub model that we've all worked on together. So yeah. And I do design and freelance on the side, which has made me have a lot of perspective from that view as well.
Yeah, wow, you really have done a lot of different things in the ag world. I can see how that variety of experience would probably help with running the collective.
Yeah.
All right, Amelia. So how does Rooted actually work as a sales platform for growers?
So Rooted is an inventory management tool and also a selling platform and marketplace. And so as a grower, you can join, or as a hub, you can join with your group of growers. We work in both ways, and you can sell wholesale, you can sell retail, you can sell both channels simultaneously. But basically you go in, you're creating your storefront, you are setting up all of your store settings and kind of controlling the visibility of your products in the marketplace. And then you're building all of your relationships. So typically folks are bringing on their existing buyers because they're looking to reduce their time sink in this whole process that they're managing on other systems. And then also connecting with other buyers in the marketplace. So you get prompts when people log in and create new profiles. So as a grower or a hub, you're getting alerted every time a new buyer joins in your area, and vice versa for buyers. But again, you're controlling that as a seller who actually sees all of your product. But it's really intended to be a replacement for sort of all of the button pushing of managing your sales, managing your inventory, and really tracking data and analytics around that and all of your orders. So streamlining that process for you. I think something that we try to step into and work closely with Jill and some of our other hubs on is really building, sort of a three-legged stool at Rooted, where technology is one leg of that stool, and it's really important. But for this community, there are two other legs that are just as important. And one is education. And so really making sure we're driving forward um, a lot of educational content to help our members on the buyer side and the seller side to really kind of grow their own practice. And then the third leg of the stool is community. And so really taking an active role in helping you to build your communities is a key piece of that. And that's kind of with your buyers, but also with other growers and hubs near you to collaborate. And so I think that's a huge way that we try to step into this space is acknowledging that you can't kind of do one of those without the other and expect them all to be going really well. Like you kind of have to be delivering on all fronts. We work with all sorts of producers. So we work in flowers, we work in food, in produce, meat, dairy, eggs, kind of across the board, but are really excited to be kind of serving this space. We've been around for a number of years now. Yeah, that is rooted.
Okay. And you facilitate retail and wholesale. So members of the public could go on there and buy something from their local farm just like a wholesaler could?
Yep, you can, as long as the farm has retail enabled. So that's up to the grower if they decide that they want to step into that. But they can manage markups, they can create farm shares, they can kind of manage their retail operation in parallel with their wholesale so that they're not having to kind of juggle through multiple inventory lists and kind of keep basically two sets of books, which I think a lot of us can end up doing if we're trying to juggle both of those channels.
Yeah.
And the same translates to a hub that would be using Rooted too, is they have the ability to enable just wholesale or wholesale and retail and kind of run on the same platform, but deliver to both audiences.
Right. And I'm assuming that you would have different price lists, like you would have a different price list for bigger buyers versus a retail customer, right?
So we don't use price lists in the same way that you're thinking about them. You're basically managing your inventory and you kind of have your base wholesale price, and then you can mark it up for your retail customers and mark up sort of different categories of products by different amounts. And then you can address the per customer price differences right on the customer. So we have a CRM tool built right into the platform. So per customer, you can add markups or discounts. And so you can say, this is a really high volume school buyer, and I'd like to give them a 10% discount on everything. Or this is a buyer who just requires a lot more handholding, and so I want to give them a 10% markup on their product. So you can differentiate pricing by buyers, but we try to streamline that so you're not having to manage lots of different lists and audiences, and you're really kind of fine tuning there and taking a more efficient look at how you're communicating pricing.
Yeah. And for us, that translates to where a farmer sets a price of a flower bunch, we sell wholesale, it automatically applies that price to it by farmer. So each farmer could have a different price point, rings at that. And then when a retail customer comes in, it automatically applies the percentage that we have across our entire retail audience. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So, Amelia, can you tell us what led you to start Rooted in the first place, and how long ago was that? When did you start like rolling it out?
We started rolling it out kind of in the really just for our local group in 2019. So, like Jill, I've been farming since I was 19 years old, which also was a very long time ago, and started on produce farms and livestock farms, and kind of eventually grew into having my own farm and focusing in on flowers. I think where Rooted became sort of a reality for us was really born out of necessity. So we were trying to start this group of growers. We were selling really via availability lists. So managing in Excel, which I think is really common. We had a really good problem in the sense that we had a whole lot of supply. So our growers had enough for us to really be selling, and we had a lot of demand. And what we were finding is that we were the problem. So my husband and I were sitting there doing all of these availability lists, and we were working full time and non-farm jobs. And we just got to a point where we were, kind of elbowing each other at 3 o'clock in the morning, trying to like build invoices and get lists out to our growers and writing, kind of writing all the checks and doing all of the things that we needed to communicate with buyers. And there was this like, gosh, there has to be an easier way to do this because we were the bottleneck. Like we were the reason that we couldn't actually sell all the things. And so it really kind of came from this place of we can see there's a need for something. And also none of the tools that were out there really met the needs of us as growers and us as folks managing hubs. And so we kind of set out to build something really just for our group. Really, that was kind of where it began, was to say, let's figure out a way to all be able to basically have an Etsy, but for our farms. And everybody goes in, we upload all of our products and our inventory. We magically aggregate that for our whole group of buyers. And then all of our availability lists go away. And everything, like all of that button pushing that we were having to do, all of the mistakes that we were making by doing it by hand, all of the time that we were spending, our theory was if we do this well, we'll just save a whole bunch of time.
Uh-huh.
And so that was kind of our reason for why we were doing this. What we weren't expecting was what actually ended up happening. So we launched this out in the middle of our production season in 2019, again, just for our small group. And instantly, like that day, our buyers doubled or tripled what they spent with us.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that we broke it. Like I just assumed we had done something wrong because I knew, like I had all these benchmarks for all the time we'd been working with these buyers of what they were spending. And I went out to them and said, gosh, I'm so sorry. What did you mean to order? And they said, no, that's all correct. You made it easy. Like it just was simple. And so we ordered more. Like we wanted more.
Wow.
And we just didn't have time to be going through all of those lists. And we had questions that we didn't realize we didn't have answered. And it just was so time consuming that we just got what we really needed from you. And we got the rest from our distributors. And so that was sort of that aha moment for us of saying, wait a minute. If that's what's standing between us and like selling all of our product and selling all of our growers' product, this is not a unique problem to our group.
Right.
And can we actually solve this more broadly? And so that was kind of the rooted origin story of saying, is there something there that can be useful very broadly to this industry? And so we launched out nationally in 2020. Connecticut was one of our first customers. So we've been working together for a while. Yeah. And that's how we started. We're now in all 50 states and work across food and flowers and meat, dairy, eggs, kind of across the board there.
Okay. Yeah. And well, you couldn't have picked a better time to launch, really, if you had a crystal ball, right? I mean, like to be like, oh, we launched our online sales platform in 2019, right? I mean, I can imagine you guys must have grown a lot, but like 2020, 2021.
Yeah. Yeah. We launched nationally on January 2nd of 2020. And had no idea what the world was going to look like a couple months later. But man, it was quite a roller coaster year. Yeah. So 2020 was interesting, I think, because it forced us to say, okay, a lot of the wholesale channels that we were all selling into have kind of evaporated overnight. We also need to build customer segmentation. And so you can sell from the same inventory to your retail customers, your direct to consumer channels, and your wholesale buyers on Rooted. And that was born out of that sort of COVID craziness, I guess, in 2020.
Yeah. Can you work with farmers in Canada, or is it USA only at this
We're
point?
only in the US right now. Yeah, we're only in the US. We hope to be able to step into Canada, but as of today, just in the US.
Okay. I always like to ask because we have a lot of subscribers and listeners in Canada too. So
Yeah.
So stay tuned, Canada.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Okay. So you guys had this really cool idea that I love, of course, because it plays off of the Growing for Market anniversary, which I know I've talked about how this 2026 is the 35th anniversary of Growing for Market. And people may or may not know that Growing for Market was started in 1992 by Lynn Basinski. A lot of flower growers will know her as the author of the book, The Flower Farmer. And in a long time, she and her family grew flowers and vegetables on their farm in Kansas. And so I took it over from her about 11 years ago. And so I love this idea that you had to talk about what has changed in the last 35 years and what we expect to change in the next 35 years, because I feel like we do tend to get very granular on this podcast. And because I think we have, a nerdy audience who's running businesses and, need those details. But I think it's a really cool idea to talk about sort of like the immediate past of market farming in the future. And I think it's really appropriate to talk about with you also, because I'm going to jump out and say that one of the trends that I've been seeing relating to what we were just talking about, the COVID pandemic, is people going online, right? Because I think anybody who was already online in that 2019, 2020 timeframe probably saw their sales jump when everything shut down in early 2020. And then that, of course, spurred a lot of other people to go online, right? So I think it makes sense to talk about online sales platforms. So that definitely seems to be one of the trends. And so I'm very optimistic about that, just because I think historically farmers a lot of times have been price takers, not so much price makers. And it's a little different with our audience because so many people in the GFM audience are selling directly through farmers markets or farm stands or something like that. They can make their own prices to a certain extent, but I do think that the rise of online marketplaces hopefully opening up more markets for people. So hopefully they're able to keep a good price and just and grow the pie at the same time. So um I definitely have my own thoughts about this, but I did want to ask you what trends you're seeing, or can you talk about how you've seen this play out at farms or hubs that you've worked on or with?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to sort of your anniversary, right? Like the last 35 years have seen a very big difference in a whole lot of things, like a very big shift in farming, especially when we look at small farms, right? Like that's really our focus. I think that's really your focus, is we're really kind of aware and trying to drive impact for small producers as opposed to kind of the much larger commodity crop production is kind of a different universe. So like looking back, I guess technology is for sure one of the big things that has changed over the last 35 years. But I think there's also just a lot more pressure on us as
Hmm.
growers over the last 35 years. I mean, if we really look back and we kind of drill into like what do the data show, 100 years ago a third of our country was farming, and that was like the career path for a third of our country. And today less than 2% of our country is farming. That's a massive shift. And I think there's been this trend to really kind of like get big or get out, and it really increases that financial and economic pressure on producers. So thinking through kind of that last 35 years, that's another big shift. Like technology has been a pro, I think, in really being able to help us as small farms. But I think one of the downsides is this income pressure, right? And that has manifested in so many producers. I think over 80% of farms are supported by off-farm income.
Yeah.
And that's hard. I mean, it's hard from a lifestyle perspective. It's hard because I think for all of us, farming just is a labor of love, and it's something that we are in it because we are wanting to feed our communities. We are wanting to show up for the people around us, and it is a very fulfilling path. And also, it's becoming harder and harder and harder for us to make ends meet. So I think like that zooming out is so important for us to do, because I think in order to really map a path forward for ourselves as a community of small farms, that is so essential, is to understand, kind of take stock of where we are, what has gone well over the last 35, 50 years, and also where do we really need to be mindful about being proactive over the next 35 years. And I think that financial pressure is a really key area for it. I think going back to that stat of, kind of the attrition we've seen in this industry over the last 5 years, we've lost an average of 75 farms per day, every single day.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That's really scary, but it's also kind of a signal to all of us to say, okay, in order to really be thinking sustainably, like let's have that eye on the future. Let's look at the next 35 years of farming. Where do we need to focus? Because that is a reality that I think a lot of us are facing. I think you see the collective really taking a very big role in driving those paths forward for the producers. And I think that's something that we really try to lean into also, is trying to make sure that the way that we're all showing up for our farms and for our hubs is mindful of those pressures,
Mm-hmm.
and also trying to be really proactive in driving impact on those. So, I mean, I think, Jill, you've probably walked through with a lot of your farms, kind of living some of those realities and also driving that change. So I think it'd be cool to hear you talking a little bit about some of their stories, because the profitability and I think burnout run hand in hand for producers, and so much of your work lifts that burden off of them.
And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Today's episode of the Growing for Market podcast is brought to you by BCS America. On our farm, we've had our BCS two-wheel tractor for over a decade, and with no belts to slip, its all-gear-driven construction is still going strong. Though we originally got it for rototilling, we kept it even when we went mostly no-till because it can do so many other things around the farm. From snow blowing to making raised beds with the rotary plow to chipping wood, it can do just about anything you might need on a farm with the right attachment. Need to shred a cover crop? A BCS flail mower will make quick work of even the most vigorous cover crop and chop it up so it breaks down quickly. Want to stir in compost or amendments without inverting soil layers? A power harrow turns your BCS into a precise tilthing machine with depth control so you don't mix deeper than you want to. With so many attachments to choose from, it truly is the Swiss Army knife of farm implements. It's why, instead of saying two-wheel tractor, so many people just say BCS. Tractors and attachments are on sale through the end of the year. Visit bcsamerica.com to find sale pricing and your nearest dealer. This episode is sponsored by Nifty Hoops. Nifty Hoops designs and builds high tunnel systems for growers who want dependable results. What stands out is that Nifty Hoops tunnels are complete systems designed by experienced builders with the details worked out ahead of time. That means the core components are included from the start, like end walls, ventilation, doors, baseboards, and double-layer poly, rather than being added later. The tunnels are designed for real wind and snow loads, efficient assembly, and long service life. You can choose a self-build kit with guidance from written manuals and videos, or a community build where Nifty Hoops works alongside you and the project gets completed in one day. Nifty Hoops has built more than 1,500 hoop houses across the country, including many funded through the NRCS High Tunnel Initiative. They're known nationwide for predictable outcomes and ongoing support. If you're planning a high tunnel project and want it done right, you can learn more at niftyhoops.com. If you grow for market, you know performance is everything. That's why so many farmers are turning to Burpee's Farmers Market. Dedicated to professional growers, Burpee is now offering non-GMO seeds in larger quantities, bred and selected for standout flavor, strong yields, and the kind of visual appeal your customers crave. All farmers market varieties are trialed at Burpee's Research Farm in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, where expert horticulturalists test for germination rate, vigor, disease resistance, high yield, and consistency, things that make a difference in the field and to your bottom line. The seed assortment includes USDA certified organic varieties, Burpee bred classics, heirlooms, and exciting new introductions. Burpee's been doing this for 150 years, and they're still creating new varieties with growers like you in mind. You can check out the full lineup at burpee.com/farmersmarket. That's burpee.com/farmersmarket.
Oh, I feel like I can clarify a little bit here too, because I think just for people to be able to bite into the actual like technicalities here is that we're the Connecticut Flower Collective is our name. So from a technical standpoint, that means like we are a group of growers and a group of designers, and we all come together in a wholesale marketplace for buying and selling, right? So we are a single member LLC, and that's how we function. We have one owner who oversees, but we do cast a lot of things to vote and kind of share responsibilities, and we have a staff that is paid. And so that's like one structure, and that's how we operate. So we're not a formal cooperative,
Hmm.
which is how some other operations run around the country. And that means like, board members and voting, and there's a lot of technical things that go into that. But I think how we're approaching this conversation and how I think it can be most applicable to like as many people as possible, just from like even a philosophical point of view, is to view what we're talking about right now through a hub model or a community model, which is to say that any individual farmer can make these same steps and can come together with their neighbors to make these missions possible. So I'm like speaking about this through like a formally organized group, but I feel like there's a lot of different ways that you can approach this, even just from like a mindset. So just wanted to like lead with that. But essentially, yeah, our group started more formally in 2019, had those first years of figuring things out, but it was also assembling a group of people who were not familiar with the collective model, the hub model. And there was a lot of hesitance, It's a little bit weird to go from a model where you're all at a farmer's market, maybe like glaring at each other across the way, like, oh, how much do you sell that tomato for? It's like there's a little bit of that competitive mindset built into every industry out there. But in farming, we're all hustling so hard that that mentality is like, I've broken my back for this. I deserve top dollar and I want my farm to do well. I might like my neighbor, but still I'm like working really hard to make this happen. So shifting from like that being the only way that you can function, right? To saying, okay, I'm actually going to work alongside my fellow farmers who might live 10, 15 miles away from me, and I'm going to actually share the marketplace with them. What does that look and feel like? And it's really intimidating and scary and vulnerable. And whether people admit that or not, I think that it's something people feel super hard when they put their heart into their work and want it to go well for their families. And um, yeah, so we have noticed from 2019 that shift, right? From those early days of like, to, we're 7 years deep now, where we have people who are sharing resources, whether that means like actual farm labor, seeds, tips, and tricks, coming to each other's locations and being assets to one another and truly supporting each other, not just through their literal resources, but through their knowledge and time. And I think our philosophy, Amelia and I talk about this all the time, but like rising tides lifts all ships, right? So this idea that like it's not me versus you. It's like if you work with me, we're actually able to succeed better together. So I think it's a big part of this hub model and community model is that mindset shift toward accepting, community over competition, if you will. And I feel like we can speak to this more during this conversation, but about how to actually do that and make that successful, because there are a lot of things that go into doing that. But I just like to stand in proof to say like it's possible. A lot of people are making it happen. So like join the club already. But yeah, so I hope that answers the question, but that's my tirade about the collective and how we've seen it happen.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a great point to make because I do think that the growing for market audience does tend to be direct market farms, which are not among the largest, but I don't want to say small because I know there's everything from very small farms in the GFM audience to people who are growing on 100 acres or more. Generally speaking, the direct market farming audience tends not to be the biggest farms out there.
Yeah,
And so I do think that collectives and also and online sales are ways for smaller farms to reach a bigger audience and maybe compete better than
absolutely.
back in the day. Or in actually, speaking of back in the day, if you I you know like if I could back up 90 years to talk about the last 35 years and then talk about the future 35 years. So, like, I really love this idea that about talking about, like, the past 35 years and the future 35 years, and one thing that it made me think about, um, Amelia, it kind of like goes back to what you were saying about how, 100 years ago, a third of the population was farming, and it's hardly anybody now. I was trying to think of w how to take the last 35 years in context, because of that, farming has changed a lot. And why
Yeah.
I wanna go back 90 years is because so my grandma was born on a farm in Pennsylvania about 90 years ago. I forget what year. She was born in the teens. Okay, so right, she was a child during the Great Depression, living on a farm in Pennsylvania, which is actually where we originally started our farm when she was still alive. We leased some land from her. The trend that I want to talk about is just the loss of that farming knowledge.
My grandmother also was born on a farm, both my grandparents also lived through the Great Depression and their farms went away. And so that was, I think we have a shared experience there. I think that story just has happened over and over and over again. And that knowledge, I think, was a loss through all of that, like that knowledge transfer. And the knowledge transfer, I think, goes along with the community that is lost through that. Like when our grandparents were farming, they had entire communities that just revolved around that industry,
Mhm.
which, of course we do in some way now, but not the same as
Yeah,
it was.
not as
For sure.
robust.
Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I think it can be really all over the place. Some places that have more of a market farming scene, you may know other people who are doing what you're doing, and then I think some places are more isolated. Some farmers may not have much of a community to draw upon, and that's a really good point. Like they probably did, like 90 years ago when my grandma was a child. Because although I think their farm was pretty typical for the mixed cropping farm, I would say they had like a small dairy, grew
Mhm.
small grains. They one thing that they did, that I know a lot of farmers try to do is have year-round employment to keep, if they have a good crew, they try to keep them. So
Mhm.
on my grandparents' farm, they logged in the wintertime. And I mean, I think these are all pretty typical farm scenarios, but they also had what they called a truck patch, which is like the vegetable patch that I think it's like the market, their equivalent of a market garden. And I was thinking about how of course, she grew up on the farm. She did all that stuff. She drove the horses. So, one interesting thing, we lived on the farm, not in the same house, but the farm where my grandma lived for a couple years. And she had dementia, which was sad, but she had the kind of dementia where she couldn't tell you what she had for lunch, but like 50 years ago was crystal clear. And so, of course, we were starting a farm and we were really interested in that. And so we heard a lot, you can imagine, about like what it was like back in the day, because those were the memories that she had access to. And the point that I'm trying to make here is that she didn't learn how to farm from YouTube videos or anything, like she lived it. And then her kids' generation, they were encouraged not to farm because like you said, it was during the get bigger, get out era. People may know that was an actual thing that the U.S. government told farmers, and Secretary Earl Butz telling them, get bigger, get out.
I think our generation was often told that too. I mean, I remember in college deciding to go and work on the first farm where I was like, I have to keep this a secret from my parents because
Yeah.
they will kill me if I tell them I actually would like to be a farmer when I grow up.
Yeah.
It just was not, I mean, I don't think that was an encouraged path for our generation either, our
Right. Like,
parents or
I
us.
struggle, I feel like was the mindset.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you're so right. Because yeah, I know a lot of the people that I know who farm that are of a similar age to me. They were definitely discouraged, right? Because most of them did not come from farming families, but I think the assumption is it's hard work, which is true, but that you can't, like you can't make any money, so don't do that. Luckily, my parents they were actually they were interested because we were hoping to start a farm there in order to eventually be able to buy the farm, which obviously didn't work out because we're up here in Maine now. But that like luck, I was very lucky because we still had that farm connection that I was very lucky to have parents who were supportive of that. They thought that was a cool thing that we were trying to do, was like to get a business going to the point where we could buy the farm, even though it didn't work out. But I feel like that's a big part of what we're trying to do here at Growing from Market is like bring back those skills and make them accessible. The kinds of things that people would have grown up knowing how to do on farms. Not many people have that background anymore.
I think it's true. I mean, you're creating dialogue around and education around so many topics that are really essential. And I think the like when you're looking at that, it's both in the weeds and really granular, and then also zooming out and really thinking about, kind of the existential questions that can feel scary to talk about sometimes, but also I think are really important. And you're giving a platform to that conversation. So I think that knowledge transfer in the community, like there's generational loss that has happened there that I think is so essential for us to be building infrastructure around and to really be thinking through like how are we creating a future for our communities
Yeah.
where we're setting ourselves and our kids up to be better off than, kind of the last 35 years that we've seen, which is, I think, where, we try to dive into these topics is to really say, like, if we're going to be realistic and we're going to be really thinking about, okay, what are some of those big issues that are driving that attrition we see in the industry? And we really want to make sure we're building a better future. Let's be honest about where some of those issues are. And I think really thinking about that financial pressure and the profitability and where it's coming from, and really having an honest conversation about burnout. And I think where it's been really interesting, kind of how we've intersected with all of our farms and all of our co-ops, is to say, how can we partner in resolving these issues? And all of the sort of human stories that Jill was talking about, of like kind of the like scarcity mindset and elbowing your neighbor out of the way and really kind of being like every farmer for themselves, that it really just exacerbates the problems. And we see that over and over and over again, is that it can feel like, oh, well, this maybe is a protective path for me, is to kind of go it alone. But actually, what we see, and we are super data geeks, and so we're really trying to understand, like, is this working the way that we want it to be working, the way that we think it should be working to build that better future? What we're seeing over and over is that when we all come together as a community, we actually sell more than the sum of our parts.
Right.
So I think that's where there's power in this community that is so essential, is that yes, there are financial pressures for sure. And there are so many things that are out of our control, but there are also things we can do to drive the needle in the right direction there. And the burnout is so heavily tied to that. Really break down, where are the sources of so many of these issues? Like, let's drive them down to the very, very core of the problem. Looking at where we're spending our time is like one of the number one things that we need to do as farms, as hub managers, frankly, as buyers, like really thinking through kind of how do we recognize that we're living in a world that is much faster paced today than it was 35 years ago, 90 years ago.
Yeah.
And there's still sort of that same financial pressure. One of the places, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about kind of the opportunities for large farms to appreciate economies of scale.
Mm-hmm.
Smaller, mid-sized farms struggle to really capture those same economies of scale. And so labor really is one of our number one line items, right? That's our number one expensive line item in our income statements. Those are places where we want to focus, is thinking about how do we increase our sales and also decrease our labor hours so that we can really kind of recapture there. And I think the community-based approach is a huge just a huge life preserver in so many ways.
Yeah. I want to put a quick plug here just because I know we mentioned small farms a few minutes ago too, and just sort of like their place within this, and sort of also like the confidence that goes into pursuing that, is sort of like, oh, I'm so small, how do I fit into this larger market, into this larger problem that we're also talking about to like overcome and actually make a viable business starting small. And I just kind of wanted to speak to that, sort of like the evolution that can happen when you adopt a community model. Is if you're starting out small, first of all, there's a place for you. In our collective, we call it like our grower ratio, is sort of like within our group, we have a few micro growers who might grow some like really specialty flowers that they can really hone and focus. So, and maybe they have a few essentials, like there are sunflower growers and they go with some of those like bread and butter items, but they'll start at that scale potentially. And then over the next few years, they're able to grow into their niche. They've made enough to expand their field, install irrigation. And what Rooted has allowed us to do as a group and each of our farmers to do is to actually see that growth year over year through their detailed analytics that are built into the program, but also seeing like, what am I listing the most of? What am I selling the most of? What do I hate growing and I can cut out because I'm actually seeing that I'm not making any money on that.
Mhm.
So it allows people to kind of create their very personalized roadmap to how they can scale if they want to. And I feel like that is just sort of like a empowering message to just say like, even if you are starting out small, there's a roadmap to growth if you want it. And if you want to stay small, there's still a way to look at that information and minimize the amount of work it takes to pull off what you're doing, and kind of using data and these like technological tools to sort of be another employee, another assisting rational hand to tell you how to make the next move if that's something you want to do.
Uh-huh. And so you think that growers are able to access bigger markets or different markets than they would be able to access otherwise through mm, online sales?
Absolutely. I mean, I think through online sales and through these hub models, like what for our origin story, it was sort of like a group of farmers who were all selling individually to the same, so floral designers, and they were individually driving product to that floral designer, individually running all of their invoices, individually going back and forth. I want a little bit of this. Oh, wait, I forgot that. Add this. It turned into this extreme time suck for each of those individual farmers who were all going to the same person. And it became this like really obvious move. Why don't we all work together and one of us delivers all of our product to that one person?
And I
And
think importantly, just to like jump in on that, what Jill is describing is fragmentation, right? So like we've got this hugely fragmented, that means like nobody's centralized. Like we're lots and lots of individual growers and hugely fragmented consumer side. All the buyers are also fragmented. And we're all repeating each other's actions throughout, right? So, like, all of the places where we can actually make that easier. And so, this is kind of going back to that original origin story is like, why did we step into this? Was what we heard from our buyers was that if we can reduce that friction, anywhere we can reduce the friction for the buyers to actually source from us and to do it all in one place, because so many of their issues, like connecting it back to profitability, we as growers want to sell more things. We have a whole lot of waste, all of us, on our farms. The WHO estimates that up to 50% of all food produced in the world wastes on the farm before it ever leaves the farm gate. That's insane. So if we're looking at profitability and kind of financial pressure and long-term solvency, well, that's a really great place to start, is let's look at the waste that we all have and how do we increase that throughput, like the amount that we can sell through to our buyers. Well, let's ask the buyers, how do we sell you more things? And the answer from them is make it easier for me.
make it easier.
Come
Yeah.
together, work together. And so you can do that through hub models. You can do that. Farmers markets are a place where you can do that, where you're kind of coming together for your consumers. And it's one of the reasons they're so successful. You can also do that through an online marketplace. So like Rooted Farmers is our online marketplace. It is a place where growers can all sell together, whether you're part of a cooperative or you're not. And so you can sell through this shop page the same way that you would go to, think about, I don't know, Etsy or Airbnb or another marketplace where as a consumer, I can go on and shop from lots of different people all in one place. That's what our buyers can do, right? Our buyers can now shop from lots of different farms. And I think to speak to Jill's point about like that fear that you can have in like that vulnerable, like, hey, let's come together. What we actually see is that when you do that, you're solving so many problems for your buyers that instead of reducing your sales by risking handing them off to your neighbor, you're actually increasing everybody's sales because you're solving the buyer's problems. So, like, kind of connecting all of those dots of, okay, profitability and financial pressure is a huge issue for us as growers. We want to sell more of our things. Let's understand the buyer's perspective and how
Yeah.
we can sell them more things. And sometimes they aren't even aware of how much more they would purchase unless you got them into this kind of flow. And what is really cool is to watch your buyers' average order values and how they shift over time because they're all increasing. The more time they spend buying from this community of growers, the more money they're spending from everybody, which is that validation point of like, how are we making sure we're driving that forward? And, I think what's been really fun is we can see on Rooted what your shift in sales have been since you've joined the platform, right? Like we can see how the Connecticut Collective has grown since they started. What we can't see is what happened before. And so we put out a survey this year to our growers to say, we really want to understand, like, tell us all the things, tell us how it's working, tell us what you don't like, tell us where these impact metrics are actually helping you or not. And what we learned, I think, surprised even us, which was that 92% of our sellers have increased their sales since joining Rooted, and almost half of them have more than doubled their sales, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's a lot.
I know. And so that thing that we saw with our group was like not unique. We're seeing that over and over and over and over again because, again, we're solving those buyers' problems. But at the same time, all of those growers reported saving over 8 hours a week in just all the labor of like button pushing and communication and all the things. So we're selling more and we're working less. So now we're driving forward on profitability because we're selling more of that waste, right? Because we're meeting those buyers' needs. And we're really dropping our burnout threshold, right? Like we're addressing those very serious mental health issues that I think we all are aware are prevalent in this industry because now we're just sort of like taking the temperature down on our labor input and all the things that we have to manage and keep in our heads and kind of juggle. That's just reduced. So I think that's been really fun for us and just kind of tying back to the on the ground work that Jill is doing and that all the other co-ops and all the other farms are doing day to day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I can see how, like when you told that story about how when you first turned Rooted on and sales went up so much, you thought you had broken it, that I can see how that's reducing friction on the buyer side of things. But that's so great that you can reduce it on the farmer side of things too, because I know, yeah, there's so much time. Like I've heard doctors call it pajama time, of like the time you're sitting there doing invoices right after your kids go to sleep, or in your pajama, all the like little things that have to be done on a regular basis, like invoicing customers, or else you don't get paid. And I think that's really helpful because it's not the easiest time to be a farmer right now. I think
No.
like so many things play into how easy it is to farm. Like I remember I was talking to some growers who were doing vegetable farming in the 80s, and they said that was a really tough time because if thinking about the chronology of farming, that the whole like locavore movement hadn't kicked in yet. I don't think people were really valuing local vegetables or organic vegetables. Farmers couldn't really get a premium for those things that should be value adds. And I think now it's really hard. Everything's expensive. I don't think it's ever easy to be a farmer, but I feel like right now is a hard time to be a farmer. And so that's
And I
really
think you
important.
need to deal with that, right? Like if we are really honest about those conversations, those are the things that in order for all of us to still be around in 5 and 10 and 35 years, we need to be really honest about those conversations that are so hard and then also productive about fixing them, right? Because that's what's driving so much of this attrition. Like, yes, there are for sure things out of our control, climate, land prices, all of these things. But this is in our control, and there are things that we can do to really mitigate on these fronts.
I also feel like sometimes there's this perception that you choose to partner with technology, or even if you're choosing to partner with other farms, that you're losing a sense of your autonomy and your independence and like way of doing things, which maybe is like very successful for you. And you're like, this is how I've always done it. It works really well for me. But I think the cool thing about what we've noticed in our group is that you still have complete control of your inventory, how you're uploading it. We provide like pricing guidance because people often want that, but they don't have to stick to it, and every hub runs a little bit differently on that
Hmm.
front. But you still have complete control of that process, how you upload the pictures that you're uploading, your descriptions, your price point. And you still have that direct connection to your audience because you're getting a collated harvest list from all of them, and you're like, wow, so and so really loves my white cosmos, like I'm growing them for her. So I feel like there is still this like very personalized tailored experience that you can have, and you don't have to like lose the way that you've done things. In
Hmm.
fact, I feel like it gives you more space to be able to do what you do on the farm when you kind of like let some of those systems that take a lot of time and energy of pajama time when you should be like watching TV and sleeping, toward those other things that matter and actually move the needle for you, which is production, being in the field, producing what you do.
I think that's so important. Like the examination of all of your workflows through this lens of, is this value add? Like, is this work that is so important that I need to be the one who is doing this thing, whatever that thing is? Like, you should be looking at every layer of your business in that way, right? And thinking to yourself, is this like I have a friend who uses this phrase, is this the highest and best use of my time? Was it the highest and best use of my time to be like manually updating Google Sheets and Excel sheets and like sending every single email? Or are there better things for me to be spending my time on? And it doesn't have to be in your business. I think some of the like highest impact work that we feel like we've done are those stories where we hear from people. We were at the MOFGA conference this week. And so we were up in Maine, and I will not name our grower, but they said this like has saved our marriage. Like, this has saved our marriage and allowed us to like be human beings again, right? And we hear those stories over and over. We had a grower who told us that it felt like she had finally sort of reached what she felt like was success in her farm. But what success meant to her was that she could both farm and go to the library with her kids during the summer. That's so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so important because we feel this like tension and this pull between these very important pieces of ourselves and our lives that we need to like be present in and also be honest about. Is that like there are places in our businesses where we are spending our time that we should not be spending our time.
We don't have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it seems like that's the to be able to take out the friction of all those things, and is one of the things that just didn't exist 35 years ago for like Lynn. Okay, so when I was talking about w- with Lynn about why she started growing for market and everything, it was because she said she had a writing background and a farming background, and she said she was researching all this stuff for her own farm, right? And so she was like, might as well start writing it up. And I feel like when I look back at the early days of growing for market, like when I tell people what growing for market is about, I'll say it's about growing, marketing, business. But I feel like back in those early days, so many of their articles were about growing. And I
Yeah.
think that's it, is that so many people had lost that farm connection, that the early days of GFM, it was just about growing that stuff. Right. And of course, there's no such thing as an online sales platform to help people, because online didn't really exist back in 1992. And so then I feel like you look at it, and then there start to be more articles about marketing, right? Because I think maybe people had started to get better. There are more resources at growing. And so then it's like, okay, how do we sell all this stuff that we grew? One emphasis that I've been trying to bring to the magazine, which dovetails really well with what you guys are doing, is the business, right? Because now it's like, you got to be good at all of the things. You got to be able to grow it. You got to be able to market it and sell it. But then, if you're not good at business, if you're not looking at those numbers, you can very easily run at a loss and go out of business, or just burn out, like you said. And so that's why I see that as a really exciting thing. That the online sales platforms are almost like allowing smaller growers to band together, almost like a Frankenstein. Frankenstein might be not be the best
I don't
analogy,
know
but
if
it's
I
Beautiful, beautiful
a,
Frankenstein.
a, beautiful, a beautiful Frankenstein, like a bunch of flowers grafted together. And
There you
so, because I think, like, whether you're dealing with a florist or a wholesaler or whatever, I feel like back in the day there was this barrier where larger farms could probably access florists or wholesalers more, right? Friction, right?
Yeah.
They're only gonna, like, if they get sales sheets or fresh lists or whatever from all these different growers, they're probably not gonna say, like, how many of these growers can I possibly buy from? They're probably gonna do the opposite and say how many of the
How do I get
fewest.
as much as possible from the fewest number of growers possible? Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like online sales is aggregating basically like selling power for farmers and hopefully streamlining the whole process at the same time. So one thing I wanted to ask you about is that, so I just about a month ago I was at the ASCFG conference, the Association of Specialty Cut Flower Growers, and I ran into so many people who are starting collectives, like particularly flower collectives, obviously because it's flower conference. But we're doing kind of like a mini theme for that on the podcast here this late winter and spring, because it looks like a trend to me. In fact, I just did a interview with an herb collective, and then I have some interviews coming up with flower collectives. And I think that's a very exciting trend because it seems like it will allow people to leverage their businesses regardless of the size and eliminate some friction. Is that something, is there a way that you can see a trend, right? Because not everybody using Rooted is a collective, but it can be used like with Jill there.
Yeah, we work with in two different ways. So you can use Rooted as an individual farm and you can use Rooted as a hub. And so those words are kind of interchangeable of like hub and collective and cooperative. It's basically just a producer collaborative way of growers and producers selling together. And so it's really designed to support either model, like either an individual producer, and so you can sell via the marketplace. As an individual producer, you're controlling who actually sees your product. So you control your buyer relationships and what they're able to purchase and when. And you can also sell through these hubs and collaborative models. And so it is, I think, a really unique opportunity for growers to build that community and that virtual sort of network for themselves. And that it does work for both approaches. And it is flowers and it's also a lot of food as well. And so we work with some really fantastic food hubs and food producers. And I think seeing that model taking off even more than it already has been so exciting because we can see the sort of like 3 years down the road path for those folks where we know how much it's helpful for each of those individual growers to then band together and figure out ways to kind of collaborate and reduce that sort of fragmented connection process and sales process, and also reduce their own burnout by working together.
And now let's take a minute to hear from our sponsors. It's with their generous support that we can bring you the podcast for free. Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Rimmel greenhouses are proudly built right here in America and shipped to anywhere in the U.S. With technical sales staff members located across the country, many with growing experience, the Rimmel Greenhouse's team of experts will serve as your trusted partner every step of the way to ensure that you get exceptional value from your greenhouse investment. Visit Rimmel.com to get a quote today. This episode is brought to you by Tend, the all-in-one AI-powered farm management platform trusted by modern growers. Whether you're growing vegetables, flowers, or fruit, or managing a nursery, greenhouse, or vineyard, you know how much time gets lost in planning, tracking, and staying organized. Tend helps you cut through the busy work so you can focus on growing and selling what matters. With Tend, you can plan your crops, assign and track tasks, manage inventory, and handle your sales and accounting all in one smart, easy-to-use platform. Whether you run a 1 acre farm or manage a large operation, Tend adapts to your scale and style, supporting everything from manual labor to fully mechanized workflows. Try it for free at tend.com. No credit card required. That's TEND.com. Streamline your season and grow with confidence. Seven Springs Farm Supply has been the market gardener's supply company for over 30 years. Their catalog includes a complete selection of organic fertilizers, pest and disease controls, growing mixes, and cover crop seed. Their experienced team is ready to help you problem solve and find the right solution for your farm and your goals. Seven Springs is committed to providing growers with superior products and service because they understand that their success depends on your success. Request a free paper catalog and learn more at sevenspringsfarmsupply.com. Seven Springs Farm Supply, the market gardener's supply company. Most CSAs don't lose members on price. They lose them because their systems break. In a recent 70-minute panel, 3 veteran CSA operators serving hundreds to thousands of members break down production planning, fulfillment, retention, and what they'd change for 2026. They talk honestly about what fails when you scale, how they protect member trust, and what actually drives renewals. Download the full conversation at farmhand.partners/GFM and see how the fastest growing farms are building smarter businesses. That's farmhand.partners/GFM.
And I want to speak to that a little bit too, Andrew, just saying, like, have we seen this over the past 7 years? We've, Rooted has put on a conference every year for flower growers hubs actually of both food and flowers to come together and kind of share their perspectives. And I feel like that has grown every year. Like, we see more engagement. And I think that there's something to be said about all of us seeing each other and that exposure, and for all of us to know that, like, yes, collectives have formed around the country and it's gone really well. And there's a lot of education and resources around these topics now that for people who are just starting out, I feel like Amelia and I have talked to groups in that situation. And there's kind of still that mindset of, like, I want to go at it alone. I know what I'm doing. I'm going to make this happen. But to know that, like, on top of, like, your local community of people to connect with, there is this larger network of hubs that exist. Like Amelia said, they're in all 50 states. Like, it's happening. And I feel like there are resources for you both locally and on a larger scale, and to tap those, because I think that when I get to talk to other collective leaders around the country, I'm like, you're the only one who understands me. It's like we kind of face a unique set of challenges, but they are shared, and they all go back to, like, the challenges that farmers individually are facing too. So I just think that there's something to be said about looking around and realizing this is happening. There are people who are doing it successfully, and to kind of band together and on ways to, like, make sure that all of those function well, because there's
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that makes me optimistic. We're talking about the challenges. I'm optimistic about the ability of online sales platforms to grow the share of the local food and flowers pie, right? Because sort of like talking about how few people farm these days, well, we know, like, I've heard various estimates of how much of the food is coming from local sources, and it's a single digit, whatever the estimate is, it's very small percentage. And we know that the vast majority of cut flowers in the US are imported for a lot of reasons. And so I'm thinking that being able to leverage online sales and collectives and things like that should be able to give smaller farmers a bigger, like, get better market share, in contrast to in the past, right? Because I'm thinking, like, okay, so this is going to date me a little bit, but about 20 years ago, I was working on a big CSA farm up in Washington State, and they were very proud that they had gotten this custom coded, like, CSA management software that they didn't tell me how much it cost, but They said it was very expensive, and I think it was very cutting edge at that time that would allow them to do things like let customers sub in or out different things that they liked or didn't like in their box, and they were trying to work on like home delivery and all these kinds of things. Whereas now, I think 20 years later, now that's off the shelf, software apps that people can get, and so that should eliminate some friction. And hopefully, it can be daunting to think like, oh, only a single digit of all the food and flowers is from local sources. You could also flip it around and say that's all market share that we could take if we got a bit more efficient, and could leverage our advantages that we have now.
And we're
Yeah.
doing a good job right now by talking about it, because I think the more people that know that that's an option and that the market share exists is to be like, there's a need there. I think Amelia and I were talking, it's like, we want people to be farming, people want to be farming, but we actually like need you to be farming. And the opportunity is there for you.
I think, there, when we step back and we sort of look like, at this problem, at that sort of 30,000 foot view, and we say, okay, we acknowledge that there are these, sort of very big challenges that we need to work to overcome to really make sure we're setting ourselves up as a community to thrive in the next 35 years. And we acknowledge that burnout is a huge one, and we acknowledge that there's this financial pressure. I think one of the things, one of the big questions that I think is really should be on all of our minds is, okay, so what can I do about it? Like, what can I do about it for my farm, and what can I do about it for my community? And I think one of the things that we point to is really tracking your data, right? Like, really take a hard look at your time, at your costs, at your waste, your loss, at where you are putting all of your energy, and really have an honest conversation about, are these the highest and best uses of my time and my money and my resources? And then I think the second one is to really look at your own business on sort of a sliding scale. When you're thinking about so many of these systems, I know we've talked about like online sales as this sort of like opportunity to unlock. I would go even farther than that and say, it is really examining what that means for your farm, and is it definitely capturing everything that you need it to be capturing? And we've joked about this before, where I think one of the things that we can kind of use as an analog is payment. So like, as a farm, I'm going to produce a case of tomatoes, and you're going to pay me for that case of tomatoes, right? And so there's this ability for us to say, did you pay me or not, where it's binary. It's a yes, no, right? Like, it's a pass or a fail. If you paid me in pennies, in $100 for a case of tomatoes, and you paid me in pennies, that passes the test, right? You've paid me. But is it the best way for you to be paying me? Because I then have to go and count my $100 worth of pennies. What if you paid me in bills instead? Or what if you wrote me a check? Or what if you paid me in credit card, and then I didn't have to chase you down at all because I just hit the like collect payment? And so there's this slide scale of, is this really the best approach, that I think is really important. And you can apply that to your entire business. And it's not just in payments, though it is a really good case for kind of thinking about credit cards and ACH and electronic payment. But it's also looking at, okay, so maybe you have a farm website. Is it actually meeting all of these needs when you look at all the time you're spending? So I think, we are obviously farmers. We're hub managers. We build selfishly for ourselves and for our buyers. And so we really try to deeply understand these problems and build tools and technology that reflects what we need as growers, so that it really streamlines all of that time sink that we often can spend. But you can take that same lens and apply it to your business in everything. You can apply it in your field operations. You can apply it in kind of your harvesting practices. You can apply it in your packing practices and look at like, where are all the touch points where you're moving product, and are there opportunities for loss there that you could trim? It's just a broad-based question that I think we can be asking, is to look at our own businesses and say, okay, I see these challenges, and I would like to, take 2026, take this 35-year anniversary and look at my own business for future proofing and saying, how do I set myself up so that I can be kind of a able to take action here.
Hmm.
I think that's one of the best ways for us to be doing it in our farms.
Yeah, I'd say so. Just getting all that data in some kind of computerized or online platform probably helps, because it's one of those things. If you don't track it, you can't manage it. I'm notoriously bad at looking back at how things actually worked out, but the first step is just to have them in there in the first place, right? And then so just using a platform like that is going to mean that the data's in there so that it can be evaluated, right? Because then like you're saying, people can look at various parts of their operation and see, hopefully find out where the waste is, and reduce it. Are there any trends or other ways that you can see that farmers could sort of like future proof their operations, like from trends that you're able to see at Rooted?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about a lot of them, but I think just circling back to, your community and really looking at your where you're spending your time, where you're spending your resources, right? Like that is kind of it. I feel like winter is always a good time to sort of do that check-in, and I think we probably have more time as producers in the winter to actually have conversations with each other, which is probably why all of our conferences and everything are concentrated in those winter months. But I think having those connection points is just really crucial, and having the check-ins and recognizing that, there are very human um impacts to a lot of these sort of business related decisions that are just as important as the business outcomes, is to really consider those human outcomes. So, I think future proofing, I would really say, and I think Jill, you probably agree, is looking at it from all angles and saying, okay, what are sort of the financial sides of this for me? How do I set myself up for success? How do I identify the issues and then overcome them? What are the kind of mental and emotional sides of this for me? And how do I think about balance and trying to chase that sort of elusive quote unquote balance in our careers and in our farms and on our lives. And I think looking at sort of the social layer of it is just that this is so isolating so
Yeah.
much of the time, and needing that community. We are social creatures, and that community can show up for you in so many different ways. And this podcast is a piece of it. Building kind of dialogue around these issues is a piece of it. I think cooperative models are a piece of it. I think, kind of building connection both with your buyers, but also with your fellow growers, even if you don't have a co-op or don't have any intention of starting a whole new business. That's okay. There are so many ways your community can really be that support for you. And I would say just like future proofing should really span all of those areas.
I also think there's something to be said there about, like, if that feels overwhelming, if it's like, okay, how do I evaluate all of the things? I think that it's really easy to start with saying, what do I hate doing in my because everyone can tell you that pretty fast,
Yeah.
Everyone can be like, here's what I'd like to complain about. And start there. Start there as the piece of like, what if I didn't have to do that? Would I like my job better? Would I show up happier at the end of the day? And if I didn't have to do that, who could do it for me? How could that thing be carried out by some other service or business or person? And starting there, I think the answer is usually pretty obvious pretty quickly. And it becomes a lot easier to then, work backwards from there to say, okay, that's my biggest pain point. How do I move away from that and toward the thing that I enjoy the most?
Hmm.
And I think that speaks to longevity, profitability, and burnout, because the more you like it, hopefully the more you'll stick with it. And the more you're making on it, the more incentivized you are to keep doing it. So I think starting there can be a really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great idea, because I know so many people get interested in farming, and then they're probably enjoy being outside and don't enjoy sending invoices and all the other stuff. And it's that stuff. I think it's that kind of stuff. It's the friction that can turn it from something that you love into something you hate, and makes you burn out. I mean, that's a really good point. Like, we talk about profitability and all those things, but you've also got to enjoy what you're doing
Yeah.
if you're going to do it long term. So that's a really good point. I really appreciate your perspective on this, because I feel like in a way at Growing for Market, I have what do they call it, like the 40,000-foot view, just because I'm I talk to a lot of people through the podcast and working with writers who are for the most part farmers on articles. Just through the magazine, I end up talking to a lot of people, but it's not very granular in a way. So I think you also have a big picture view, but I feel like you see a different angle and maybe a little bit more granular than I do. So it was really interesting for me to hear your perspective on it, and you've been really generous with your time and but I did want to ask if there was anything else that I should have asked you, or if you'd like to say before we let you go.
No, I mean, I think we really, uh, I think, strive to create resources and support for everyone in this space. And so I would just ask that, folks reach out to us if they have questions, if they have suggestions, if they would like to have dialogue around any of these topics, because that's really, I mean, that's how we have built, it's how we've grown, it's how we've gotten to the place that we are. And I think it is like the single most important thing as we're really thinking through how do we build something that feels representative into the future is to have that dialogue constantly with folks. So I would just say reach out. We've got lots of resources on our blog. We've got lots of resources. We've got a podcast that we've also started this year that is really exciting to, again, just try to bring education and discussion and dialogue to this audience. And various micro learning opportunities. We have courses, lots of different places where you can kind of dive in. And if we don't have it, we'd love to hear from you. And we'll try to work through building those out more. But yeah, I mean, I think you're doing a fantastic job. This is hugely important for all the reasons we've talked about today. And we just appreciate you and everything that it's taken to get to the 35-year anniversary. And we look forward to the next 35 years too.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, it takes a community, and I mean, of farmers, and then also all the people working to support farmers. So yeah, I hope we can play a part in that and to help keep market farming moving forward. I think that's stronger than it was 35 years ago, and hopefully we can keep that trend going. Well, so okay, so Amelia, on that tip, tell people what your podcast is called and where they can find you online or social media or wherever you want people to look you up.
Yeah, our podcast is called Barn Talks, and Jill and I host that. And I think it's a really fun place for us to just bring voices from inside the industry and also outside the industry to kind of offer different perspectives that can be helpful. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Spotify podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and yeah, love to have you join us there.
Cool. Anytime. All right, Jill, where can people find you online or social media, or wherever you want people to look you or the collective up?
Yeah, so our website has a lot of information. We have FAQs and sort of you can see a lot about like our structure through the website, which is ctflowercollective.com. And you can always email us and reach out if you have questions. Like Amelia said, there's courses that we've helped with that are really helpful for collectives who are starting out and wanting information that way.
Mm-hmm.
We're very like transparent and we want to give, we want to share. So like don't be intimidated to reach out. You can find us on Instagram too at Connecticut Flower Collective, all spelled out. And that's where you can see how silly all of us are and how not intimidating. And glad it doesn't take geniuses to run this stuff. So, definitely reach out to us on there. And yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much for all you are doing to eliminate frictions for farmers. You guys are awesome, and I really appreciate you taking the time to tell us about it today. So keep up the good work, and let's keep in touch.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Andrew.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you both.